Shalom Aleichem. We continue in Hilchot Talmud Torah, Rabbeinu Gadol, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimun, Zichrono Livracha. Perek Hamishi. Halacha Daled or Beth. You should be able to see it now on the screen. In the previous halacha, we saw that it said, Lefichach, Ameru Hachamim, Kol HaCholek al Rabo, Keholek al HaShechina. Now, Rambam, in this halacha now, halacha Daled or Beth, says as follows: Ezahu Holek al Rabo. What is considered to be Holek al Rabo? Ze shekovea lo midrash. Midrash is what we would describe as yeshiva, or setting oneself up to teach, as it says here, with Yoshev, with Voresh, umelamed, shelo birshut Rabo. V'Rabo Kayam. In other words, a person who has learnt from a certain Hacham for a period of time, and now he decides he is going to start teaching himself, and his Rav is alive, even though his Rav is in another city. It's also, of course, referred to another country, but really the word Medina refers to another city, a major city. And it is asur for a talmid to more halacha, to be posek halacha, in the presence of his Rav, not just literally in his presence, but also within a certain geographical radius, as we're about to see. V'chol hamoreh halacha b'fnei rabo hayav mitah. And he who does so is hayav mitah. Hayav mitah b'dei shamayim, not via Beth Din, obviously. Now there are a number of details to do with this halacha. The first thing that needs to be explained is that the concept of shekovea lo midrash has to do, l'chora, teaching Torah is a wonderful thing, and we would be interested in having as many people teaching Torah as possible. The concept of kovea lo midrash has to do with asserting one's independence, and much more in the past was it the case than today, that Torah was learned directly from one or more Rabbanim. The main body of one's understanding and knowledge was from that Rav. Books were not generally readily available. Torah Ba'al Peh literally was Ba'al Peh. It was something you received, which is why what you learned from your Rav was called a shemu'ah, that which you heard from your Rav. That which is heard, that which is conveyed mipeh la'ozen, from mouth to ear. And it also follows that the allegiance to and the connection and the awareness on the part of the talmid to what an extent he is dependent upon that Rav, and to what extent he has studied and become who he is today because of that individual. This was much more keenly felt, much more and much more real, because today it is not always the case that a person has a Rav, or has a Rav she nimado rov chochmato, someone who taught him most of what he knows or understands. Because the basic texts, the basic information is in books nowadays. So to know what the Mishnah states, to know what the Talmud on that Mishnah states, to understand Perush Rashi on that section of the Talmud, etc., is all there, laid before all. Shulchan Aruch b'fnei kulam. On the other hand, we also know that one cannot claim that this concept of understanding Chokhmah and the correct approach, etc., no longer exists. One cannot claim that, because we also know that how one reads the text, and how one reads between the lines, and how one just knowing what we call generally today derech halimud, the way, the approach, the system, the method of study, knowing which books to open, precisely because there are so many books, and there are increasingly more and more books. Books are still being printed all the time, particularly in the Torah world. Therefore, one is very easily lost in this ocean of written material, of words, and one has to know where to even begin to look, what books to open, where to begin to search for something, or to discover various perushim and sources and references. And this certainly one can learn from one's Rav. Occasionally it will happen today that a very talented, very intelligent, and very industrious Talmud student will be able to achieve this and forge his own way and create his own derech in Limud Torah to a very large extent off his own bat. That is true. Something which could not possibly have happened in ancient times. If a Talmud did not hear the Mishnah from the Rav, he probably wouldn't know that this Mishnah existed, this halacha existed. And if he had heard it, he wouldn't know exactly to what it refers. So these halachot are somewhat abstruse and difficult to pin down today, where exactly they are relevant, to what extent they are relevant. I have in my computer a very interesting document that was sent to me by a certain relatively young Haredi Talmid Chachamim a few years ago. He is if I'm not mistaken, he is the great-grandson of a certain Rav who was, I think we're talking of the Baal. What's the name of the book? Einaim LaMishpat. You have Ein Mishpat on the Talmud on the side of the page, which is gives you references to some of the Posekim, Rishonim, like the Smar, the Rambam, the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch. There was a Rav, Hagon Rabbi Yitzhak Arieli Zetzal in Yerushalayim. he was considerably younger than Rav Kook. Maybe mistaken. Maybe he's not the great grandson. Maybe it's the grandson. At any rate, he learned in Yeshivat Merkaz Rav in the time of Rav Kook for many years. He was in fact the central Ram and teacher of Talmud and Halacha in the yeshiva at that time, and he had a daily Havrutha with Rav Kook. And he knew Rav Kook well, and he made a note of all manner of things that he saw and heard from Rav Kook, saw Rav Kook doing or saying. And he sent me this list of Eiduyot, these testimonies, these things that were witnessed by Rav Arieli. One of the things mentioned there is that Rav Kook once said to him that today the kiyuth is less important than it used to be, because we have lots of books. Most of the material that you would want or would need is available. It's not always the case, but that's much more the case than it used to be, and therefore the main part of understanding, the real thing that one needs to become a real chacham is the question of understanding, not knowing or finding the text, but how to make your way through all those texts and how to analyze, how to synthesize, analyze what to accept, what to reject. That is the main part of Talmud Torah, and also the main thing that one can receive from one's Rav today. So these are things to take into account with regards to these halachot. Rambam continues here, and he says as follows: Haya beno uven rabo. This is halacha Hey or Gimel. Haya beno uven rabo shenim asar mil. A mil is usually interpreted to be approximately the two possible interpretations, either a kilometer, sometimes defined as 960 meters, or a kilometer, give or take. Another understanding of this concept, in most contexts at least, is that it refers to a mil romi, a Roman mile, which is, from what we see all over the remains of the milestones which exist in what was the Roman Empire, not a few of which exist to this very day. In fact, there are a number of them standing not very far from where I'm sitting at the moment. In fact, less than a kilometer from where I'm sitting, or less. You could walk there in 15 minutes, and you can see these stone pillars, which are Roman milestones, along what's called here in Gush Etzion to refer to Derech HaAvoth, because it's the same road that exists in the time of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, aleihem shalom. The same ancient road over through the hilly section of the country, going from north to south. So it's referred to often as Derech HaAvoth. This is the same road, the same topography, the same route was utilized by the Romans, and they built their Roman road there with milestones. And the length is between one milestone and the next is 1,470 meters approximately. In some places, the Roman Empire apparently is 1,480. That's supposed to each of those increments is supposed to reflect a double pace of a Roman soldier. So 12 mil is therefore a fair distance. So it's either 12 kilometers or it's about almost 1.5 kilometers times 12. היה בינו ובין רבו 12 מיל, ושאל לו אדם דבר הלכה. So if a Talmid was someone who has really learned a lot and can answer questions, and he finds himself at least that distance from his Rav. Mutar lahashif. Someone asks him a question. Mutar lahashif. He is allowed to respond. He cannot say to this person, "Well, go to my Rav. He's down the road," and ask him. That's a serious distance. So he's allowed to answer. Ulafrish min ha'isur, and more so if we're talking about a situation where the Talmud sees someone about to do something which is asur, which is prohibited. Afilu bifnei rabo, even if his Rav is present, mutar leharov, he is allowed to tell the person, no, you must not, you cannot do that, or that is wrong, and you must do something different. Kesad, for example, kevon shera adam osa davar ha'asur, if he saw a person doing something asur, prohibited, mipnei shelo yada bi'isuro, or mipnei rish'o, either because this person simply does not know that this is asur, or because he is a rasha. In other words, he doesn't care, and he is quite happy to do that which is asur. Yeshlo lahafrisho, he is allowed to tell this person and try and cause him to cease and desist. V'lomar lo davar ze asur, wa'afilu bifnei rabo, wa'af al pi shelo natanu rabo reshut, even though his Rav did not say anything or allow him to do so. This is he is allowed to do. Shekol makom sheyesh hilul Hashem, en holakim kavod larav. Wherever there is hilul Hashem, and the fact of a Jew doing something which is asur is hilul Hashem on one level or another, seeing that there is hilul Hashem involved, en holakim kavod larav. And the kavod of Hashem obviously comes before the kavod that he owes to his Rav. If the person involved is unaware of the Isur, Hilul Hashem exists, but it is much less. If the person knows that it is Asur, but couldn't care less, obviously the Hilul Hashem, the chutzpah, the audacity and the cheek and the affront to Hashem and to the Torah and to other people who care about these things is much greater. When is this the case? This is halacha wow over here. Or Gimel in other books. If something, a certain situation occurred, and in that situation he acted in that way. In other words, a person turned to him and asked him a question, or he saw such a person doing an avera or about to do something like that, and he responded to that particular circumstance. However, avar likbo'an asmu lehora'ah u'leshev u'lehoroth l'chol sho'ed, but to set himself up as a hacham, inviting all and sundry to turn to him and ask questions. Likbo'a asmu lehora'ah u'leshev u'lehoroth l'chol sho'ed, and to answer anyone who turns to him, and make it known that this is the case, and I'm now the local chacham or one of them, and you can turn to me. Afiluhu b'sof ha'olam, even if he is on the other side of the world. V'rabo b'sof ha'olam. Asur leharoth ad sheyamuth rabo. He is not allowed to do so, to establish himself, as it were, as such a person. Unless he received permission from his Rav.
Rav?
Yes.
Does this apply today as well, now that we can communicate with people over much longer distances?
It's a very valid question. And as I said before, it's not always clear and obvious how to implement all of these halachot today, as opposed to ancient times. the concept of smicha, supposedly the idea was, and this was the essential idea of smicha in ancient times, and also in more recent times, that the Rav gave reshuf, gave permission to his talmid to be mureh halacha b'chol makom. He was announcing by so doing. It was a personal, and it was based on this connection between the Rav and this talmid. It was based on this close acquaintance and knowledge of the person. And the person, the Rav, was by so doing, was indicating that he knows. In my view, he knows what to do, what to say, how to respond, how to teach, and B, he has my permission to do so. That was the original concept of smicha l'rabbanut, or what we call, what's called today perhaps smicha l'rabbanut, what was simply called in ancient times smichat hachamim. Originally, this was something that was done only on the individual or the personal level, from the Rav to the Talmid. And at a later time, it was decided that it should be done only b'reshut ha-nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, or the Beit Din Gadol, or the Beit Hawa'al in Eretz Yisrael would require also his involvement and his agreement. Unfortunately, we know that today things do not work that way. In other words, if we are to be honest, there are many people out there who have gone through some kind of smicha program and have studied whatever it is that they were studied in a certain way, usually in a rather perfunctory fashion. And a person who is honest and serious will know and admit that it does not necessarily carry too much weight, this smicha. It's generally seen as some kind of like many academic degrees. It allows you to apply for a certain kind of job or something like that. So unfortunately, the concept has been cheapened greatly. So the essential thing here is to understand that to set oneself up as a teacher of Torah or a mureh halacha is not a simple matter, should not be taken lightly. And the essence of this halacha is about reshuf, about, as it were, not rising up against one's Rav, or not breaking off on one's own without the Rav's permission. This is seen as a lack of respect towards the Rav and towards the teaching of Torah in general. Rambam continues. Halacha Zayin, or still Halacha Gimel, v'lo kol mishemeth rabo mutar lo leshev lehorot b'Torah. We said earlier in Halacha Daled or Beth, זה שקובע לו מדרש, ויושב ודורש ומלמד שלא ברשות רבו, ורבו קיים, when his Rav is alive, from which you might understand that if his Rav is no longer alive, then this does not apply, and he can go off and teach Torah and do as he sees fit. So Rambam is telling you here as follows. ולא כל מי שמת רבו מותר לו לשב ולהורות בתורה. It's not enough that your Rav has passed away. אלא אם כן היה תלמיד שהגיע להוראה. he has to be such that can be considered shehigia l'hora'ah. Now, that is to some extent a subjective determination. As we said before, the concept of smicha, which was essentially the concept of reshuth, was a personal and subjective determination by the Rav vis-a-vis his Talmid. And it could be theoretically that in the eyes of this Rav, this Talmid is Ra'ui lahora'ah, is able to be Moreh halacha in all areas of Torah, or some areas of Torah. There also was semicha for various matters, such as things to do with Bechoroth was a particular distinct area of halacha, which required certain expertise, etc. And therefore, it's difficult. How would you describe this today? How would you define it today? So again, some people would say, well, if a person has a samicha from wherever, there's many possibilities, then he's ra'ui lahora'ah. It would be nice if that were true. And that's about all I can say, really. It's not so. And I think serious people know that it's not so. Rambam continues. This is now in some books, Halacha Daled, the continuation of Halacha Zayin, over here. V'chol Tamid shelo higia lahora'ah umoreh, and a Talmid who did not achieve this level, and yet decides that, well, I'm going to be Moreh Halacha, which is often the case because of his hubris. Such a person is to be considered a fool, a person without wisdom and understanding, a rasha, and also a rasha, because he is acting in a very improper and irresponsible way. V'chas ruach, hubris, pride. Walau ne'emar ki rabim halolim hipila. Chazal Doresh, the pasuk in Mishneh, which is not referring, Lichora, the Fiat Pshat, is not referring to Talmud Torah, but to something rather different. The Chachamim would Doresh this pasuk with reference to Talmidim, usually relatively young, Sheloshim Meshu Kol Tzorkam, who have not yet achieved that level, and yet decide to set themselves up as a Rav, as a Moreh Hora'ah, as a Mori, to use the Temani term. But there is another side to this coin. A Chacham, a person who is able to do so, but does not do so because he doesn't want to take it upon himself. Or he does not consider himself to be able or worthy, but the truth is that he is, but he's just being overly cautious and overly humble. Hareza monea Torah. This person is preventing and limiting the Torah that will be heard and understood in the world. And if he were to speak up and say certain things in various situations, people would be able to at least take note of what he said, and maybe they would listen, and maybe they would know what to do. But if he remains silent, then people will be led astray. They will not know what to do. They will lead themselves astray. So the pasuk there in Mishneh states, there it's referring about an Isha Zonah who entices men to sin. So on the one hand, Rabim Halolim Hipila, on the other hand, Wa'asumim Kol Haruveha. So Hazawad Doresh, on the one hand, in this case, it's pride, it's Ga'awa, or other motivations which lead the person astray, this Talmid astray. And he will literally cause great damage and harm, because he will say and teach things which are wrong, which are incorrect. And that's a serious problem. That's Rabim Halolim Hipila. It's like this woman causing so many people to sin. On the other hand, Wa'asumim Kol Haruveha, and many other number of those she has killed and brought low, is in this connection is someone who could teach and set people straight and does not do so. So the balance is a fine one, and it's not an easy balance always to strike. Often it is the case that the decision, to some extent, especially nowadays, without the formal structure of the Torah world that existed in the time of the Tanaim, the time of Rabbi Yehuda and Nasi, etc., then the structure of Torah, the institutions and the positions, the various types of appointments that were made in the Torah world, and this is also the case in Bavel, particularly later, but even during the time of the Tanaim, there was a much study of Torah in Bavel. As we know, Rabbi Nathan HaBavli and Rabbi Yoshia, and the son of Rabbi Yoshia, Rabbi Ahai, Rabbi Yoshia. There are many. That period of our history and the history of the Torah Sheba'al Peh is not widely known and not generally understood, overlooked and misinterpreted, sometimes deliberately, by various people, various researchers, historians who have their various agendas. One of the best books on the subject is called Dorot HaRishonim by Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi, who wrote a series of 6 or 7 volumes, altogether 7 volumes, I think. Dorot HaRishonim, which is it can probably be found on Hebrew books or in other places. It's written in a style which, in a language which, for some people today, is certainly unfamiliar and difficult, even perhaps. But it's really actually not that difficult. It's just you have to be aware of the style and the background. These Sefarim came out roughly 130 years ago, 120 years ago. The author, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi, was in touch with Rav Kook. Rav Kook wrote him a number of igrot of letters that we have, and he praised him very highly. And he was a great chacham with tremendous bekiyuth in Divrei Hazal and in other areas as well. He covers essentially all of Jewish history, from the time of the Mikra and up until the time of the Geonim, etc. So, returning to our topic, so when the Torah world was more structured, and there were formal positions and of authority, then a person's position or title was much more closely a function, was much more a function of whether he was appointed to a certain position within that hierarchy. But seeing that structure began to unravel in various places and at various times, to some extent, it's the system became democratized to some extent, which is both a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that it might prevent and preclude various types of corruption and nepotism within the system. On the other hand, when every Tom, Dick, and Harry gets to decide who is the Chacham and who should be the Rab and to whom people should turn, well, you understand that that also can be a very problematic situation. But take someone like Rabbeinu Shlomo, like Rashi, for example. Rabbeinu Shlomo, Zichrono Livracha, as a young man, traveled east into Ashkenaz, into Germany, to study in the yeshiva over there, yeshiva of Rabbeinu Gershom or Agola. And he studied there for quite some time. And he did not know Rabbeinu Gershom or Agola, but he was taught by 3 different Chachamim who were students, Talmidim of Rabbeinu Gershom. And we don't know a lot about that time, but we know that Rashi was there, and we know that eventually he returned to his hometown, further to the west, in northern France as well. And at some point, he began to be a Chacham that people recognized and turned to. How did that happen? Because people just know that this person knows what he's saying. And if you want to know what the Torah says, if you want someone to teach you Torah or to answer a question, well, then you will eventually discover to whom one should address one's questions and to whom one should turn. So to some extent, the people decide. Sometimes decide correctly, and other times less so. It goes without saying that a situation in which Torah and politics are intertwined is a very dangerous and impossible situation, and that cannot work out well. So Rambam continues. So seeing that this is a phenomenon that exists, has always existed, that you have people, usually younger people, but not always just younger people, who wish to establish themselves, make a name for themselves prematurely. So Rambam says the following, and this is again all based on explicit statements of Chazal, Halacha Heth, or still Dalad, Elu hatalmidim haqetanim shelo hirbu Torah karaui. When you have young students of Torah who have not studied sufficiently, lo milu et keresam b'vasar uvayayin, they have not literally filled themselves with the meat and the wine of Torah. In other words, they are still lacking. And what drives them, their motivation is hubris and ga'awa. And they wish to establish themselves as important and respectable and people that deserve honor and status. Amongst the common people and the people in their town, and they push themselves, they have sharp elbows, and they push themselves and make their way, as it were, to the forefront, to set themselves up as Torah authorities. Such people cause mahloket within Am Yisrael, within the Torah world, and therefore within the entire Jewish people. And they literally destroy the world. They bring calamity to the world. And they extinguish the candle, the light of Torah. Because people eventually will see that what's going on here is a power play and unwholesome aspirations and desires. These are all expressions are used by Chazal. In other words, they are destroying Hashem's vineyard, as it were, of Am Yisrael. And it's like a person who deliberately sows thistles and thorns and what have you in a well-cultivated vineyard. وعليهم أمر شلمو بحكمته أحزوا لنا شعلين قطنين محبلين كرامين. So these expressions you see emanate from this pasuk in Shir Hashirim, talking about foxes that infiltrate karamim and well-cultivated places, well-preserved and guarded places, and cause damage. Just like the shu'al is a relatively small animal, but generally perceived to be cunning and sly. So such people can often be perceived correctly, unfortunately, as sly, as calculating, and have to have less than pure motives. Rambam continues. ואסור לו לתלמיד לקרוא לרבו בשמו. The Talmud may not address his Rav by name, ואפילו שלא בפניו, and even not in his presence. So he cannot be speaking to other people about his Rav and refer to him by his name. ולא יזכיר שמו בפניו, nor should he mention his name at all in his presence. Which means, as Rambam now explains, ואפילו לקרוא לאחרים ששמם כשם רבו, even to use a name which is the name of his Rav, but it's also the name of somebody else, of other people. He may not use that name in his Rav's presence. כדרך שעושה בשם אביו, as he also is to do with regards to his father. As we said, there is a connection between these two things. As the Rambam said at the beginning of this perek, כשם שאדם מסועד בכבוד אביו ובירתו, כך הוא חייב בכבוד רבו ובירתו. So this applies also to one's Rav. Some way he should refer to them by some different appellation. In other words, an unusual name. Seeing that it is an unusual, rare name, as soon as one hears, people will hear this name, they immediately associate it with that Rav. But if it's a common name, Rambam says, now this is not the case. We'll see this in a moment. Rambam discusses this in Hilchot Mamrim. Because here in Hilchot Mamrim, Perek Shishi, Rambam says here in Halacha Gimel, you should be able to see it on the screen. Ezehu Mora, what is considered Yir'ah with regards to one's Rav, Ezehu Kavod. These are two concepts, as Rambam says at the beginning of this Perek, Kibud Avoim, Miswach Aseh Godola, V'chen Mora Avoim. So here we're talking about one's father. Mora lo omed bimkomo, fear and respect is, in practical terms, comes down to these kinds of things. Lo omed bimkumo, does not stand in his place, wherever it may be, in the Beit Knesset or in some other place where people are gathered. Lo yoshev bimkumo, does not sit in his place. V'lo soter et devaro, v'lo machriya et devaro, v'lo yikra lo bishmo, lo b'hayav, v'lo b'motho. He never refers to his father by name. El Omer Abba Mari, as we saw last time, I believe. Haya Shem Aviv or Shem Rabo Keshem Aherim Mishaneh Shemam. And if his father's name is similar to the names of other people, he should somehow make some change. So he does not refer to his father by name. Rambam has a hidush here, which is why he writes Yera'eli. It seems to me this is not mefurash in the Talmud. She'en nizhar b'chach ela b'shem shehu pali or pali. In other words, very unusual. She'en akol dashimbo, something which is a name which is not generally heard. Aval hashemot shekorim bahem kol ha'am, the common kinds of names like Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, etc. Koreh bahem lachirim shelo b'fanav en b'chach klum. That is not what Chazal refer to. They're referring, Rambam says, to names which immediately will be associated with this, with one's father or with one's Rav. So the same applies what Rambam wrote there in Hilchot Mamri, Hilchot Kibud Wa'em applies here as well to one's Rav. Furthermore, Rambam says, let's now return to Hilchot Talmud Torah. Rambam says here, "V'lo yiten shalom l'rabo or yahazir lo shalom k'derech shenotanim hareim u'mahazirim zelazeh." One should not greet one's Rav or respond to a greeting from his Rav as he would with anybody else. In other words, he shouldn't say to his Rav, "Hi, how are you?" Something like that. Ela shohelefano, he should bow down. In other words, lower his head and bend his back lefanot a certain amount. U'omer lo b'yirah v'chavod, and he should say to him, "Shalom alecha Rabbi," and he should respond and speak to him with great respect and say, "Shalom alecha Rabbi." Im nathan lo Rabbo shalom, and if his Rav greeted him, they met in the street, shall we say, Yahazilo shalom alecha Rabbi Umari, or Rabbi Umori, that depends really, whether it's Rabbi Umori or Rabbi Umari, whether it's my teacher or my master. Heyu beruchim, hizku v'yames levavchem kol ha'meyahalim l'Adonai.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.